Security is another big thing, making sure that certain employees have access to only things that they need access to. And then, of course, keeping unwanted people, hackers or malicious actors, out of your system to make sure that your data is protected. They're not trying to extort you for money. So managed services really encompasses all of those activities of
Outsourcing your IT services can save you a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. Joining me today is Greg Brainerd. He is the CEO of Braintek in Houston, Texas. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how you doing, Raj? Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Welcome. And so let's get started with what managed IT services are. Why do small businesses need them?
Well, managed IT is taking care of the computers, the network, the servers, the things that companies really rely on for their daily business activities. So that's going to be email, getting into their server, maybe getting into a cloud system like QuickBooks Online, any of those types of things, and just managing that equipment, those processes. There's a lot of things that go into it. Making sure that your data is backed up is probably one of the more critical things that we've been dealing with for a long, long time. Security is another big thing, making sure that certain employees have access to only things that they need access to. And then, of course, keeping unwanted people, hackers or malicious actors, out of your system to make sure that your data is protected. They're not trying to extort you for money. Those types of things. So managed services really encompasses all of those activities of setting up computers, fixing broken things, installing new applications, doing the security for those types of things. Small businesses need these kind of services because a lot of times the staff that's there, the owner, may not have the expertise to manage those things. Maybe they can set up a computer, but they really don't understand connecting the computers together, making sure that the security is set up, making sure that their systems are backed up, making sure that employees just don't have access to things that they don't need access to, which could be, I hire an engineer, but they don't need access to my accounting data, for example. They certainly don't need to see payroll information. And the other way around, the accountant person doesn't need access to the engineering files at all, so why grant them that access?
When someone works with a company like Braintek in Houston, they're actually getting a team. It's not just an individual person. And sometimes that can also be very beneficial too, because small businesses don't always have a team of IT professionals on staff to manage everything.
That's correct. Yeah, our team comprises of about 20 different individuals. A couple of them are obviously back office, like in sales or whatnot, but the bulk of our staff composes of help desk technicians at various different levels. We have levels going from one all the way up to senior level technicians that are considered three, and these technicians will remote into your machine, handle those types of problems that you may have. If they can't do it remotely, for example, and we need to come on site, we have a dedicated group of individuals that also will be dispatched out to our client locations, and that they can handle the physical on-site needs that are needed. So moving equipment, visually inspecting equipment that may have some problems, just doing things that are, if the internet's down at that location, obviously, then we can't remote in. So things like that. And then we also have a team of individuals that do project work. And so this encompasses like building out a new server or moving from an on-site server to a cloud system, those types of activities. So yeah, we have a plethora of people that we're employed to do all types of tasks. And of course, if one individual doesn't know how to do something, then we can escalate or talk to somebody else within the organization that, that does have that expertise that's needed.
That's really nice because when companies are in large institutions, they often have an IT department that they can call upon to do these kinds of things, where small businesses don't. And that's the value of using an IT service provider in Houston, is to be able to just pick up the phone and have that person that's on call. Um, so, what kind of clients typically work with you? Are they people who already have an IT services company they're working with and they transition to you, or do they also, are a lot of them people who don't have that and are looking for that for the first time?
We've worked with quite a different varying level of different companies, from startups that are just trying to get their networks off the ground and get their business kind of going. So in those types of environments, we'll set up servers for them, set up all their IT services, handle their support from the start. And then there's others that are a little more mature in their business. Maybe they're at 10 to 20 employees, as an example. They typically will be using either an IT guy or some other managed services provider in the Houston area. if they're unhappy with their services for some reason, or if that particular person or group is no longer available, we often see that kind of thing. So, my IT guy got hit by the bus, or got sick or died. He's unavailable. I can't get a hold of that person anymore. We run into a lot of those scenarios.
Mm.
Companies that are kind of a little bit larger than that, in that 30 to 50 range, they definitely need someone that's going to be managing their IT structure. They have a lot more employees. There's a lot more problems that can occur. The complexity of their network and IT systems are much more difficult, and so we'll find that that's a requirement at that level. And then there's large organizations that maybe already have their own internal staff, and sometimes we'll supplement that staff. So maybe they've got a guy that's employed there that just has basic IT level experience, and just doesn't understand how to do server work. Or and maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they are doing server work and they just don't have time to manage with daily employee activities. So they need someone to help them on the help desk side. So we can really backfill a lot of those positions in various different levels. But we work with all kinds of businesses in the Houston area.
Oh, that's really that's really useful. Um, can you talk about some of the roadblocks that small businesses experience? Like, what kind of common IT issues hinder their progress to growth?
Well, I mean, there's going to be all kinds of different things that could be that. So if maybe they don't have the business processes in place, they don't understand what that might mean. I need to communicate with my staff, but what's the best way to do that? Um, right now, maybe I just email files back and forth to, when I'm one or two person shop, I can manage that. I can just email documents to someone, and that's okay. But at some point, you're going to start running into, well, who's got the latest copy of that file? Is that data secure? What happens if I if I override it or lose it or back it up? I'm sorry, and it's not backed up. There's all these kinds of questions that can really hinder that growth. So as you scale and get larger, emailing files back and forth isn't great. So then they use some kind of file tool like Dropbox or Google Drive, and that's really nice too. But again, as you scale, that becomes much more difficult to manage. And so the same kind of problems occur. If I'm using the free Dropbox as an example, I start running out of space on it. And then I'm opening up another free account and another free account because that makes sense to me. But why not getting a team account or switching to SharePoint or something like that? And then there's people that'll be subscribing to Dropbox or some service like that. And then in addition, they have Office 365, which includes those things. And so they just don't understand, how do I get to that next level? What's the evolution of that? Maybe I want to put an application on my that we need for my business, an ERP system or whatever, but it's not cloud-based, so I need some kind of equipment to put it on. How do I go through that process? And so an IT professional or a managed services company like ourselves will really help guide our clients through those growth points, advise them on what they need, help them get quotes for equipment and services, and then help them put it all together and assemble that and make sure it's working. And then at the after that's all completed, managing it, making sure that again it's still secure, it's backed up, it's all of those things. Because if all of a sudden you lose your data tomorrow, all of it, can your business function? And if the answer is no, not really, well then we need to make sure that we have provisions in place to get you back up and running quickly. I mean that could be a huge problem for growth if you run into that, or it could put you out of business.
That's a big issue for many companies because we hear about large institutions getting hacked or maybe there's some sort of data loss. They always kind of come through. With a small business, that could just put you out of business, and so that's a pretty serious issue. It's something that small businesses oftentimes don't pay attention to, but really need to be. Um, yeah, exactly. So, what are the kinds of stories you might have of some clients who were in a particular situation where they didn't have everything either backed up or maybe they didn't have all of their servers updated with the latest patches? What did you do to go in? Do you have any examples of stories you can share of Houston companies?
Absolutely. So we had a company that started working with us. They were in a panic. They had gotten hit by a ransomware, and
Mm.
so their server had been completely encrypted, and so they were being extorted for that. So they came to us and they're like, well, first of all, can we do anything about that? And our first question is, well, do you have any backups? And then the next answer they gave us was the IT guy that they were using was sick and unavailable. So they did not have access to any of that stuff. So we had to go into a recovery mode and try to hunt and find where all this data is. So of course, while this is all happening, they can't function as a business. We're trying to discover where the backups are. Do they have backups? What on the server is recoverable or not in this particular scenario? And then once we identify that, that takes some time to go through that. Depending on how large the organization is, that can be a couple of hours and that can be a couple of days. So then next, we need to back up whatever that is, and that's what we did for this particular case. And then we rebuilt their server, so we had to completely wipe it, reset it back up, and then what we did is we, joined all their computers back to that system, and then set them up a new structure that was being backed up. The files that we could recover, we did recover, and then there was some stuff that we could not recover that they had to recreate on their own, which was terrible. But that's the scenario that they were in at that point. They had luckily their primary application was an old FoxPro database that that wasn't accessible to the ransomware virus, and so it didn't touch it. And luckily, we were able to find it, set it back up, and then continue on. Now, it did interestingly on that particular case. FoxPro is a program that people could create back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and it's no longer supported by Windows 10, Microsoft Windows 10 operating system. So when we try to run it, it wouldn't function. And so we had to set up older Windows 7 machines so they could get into that particular software to run.
Hmm.
And then we started another process of getting them off of that old software and onto more modern day software that will continue to run on Windows 10 and 11 machines. So that was, a really difficult thing. It was very painful. And if they had some backups in place, the process probably would have been a little bit better. If we had better security in place for them before the attack happened, it could have been prevented entirely.
So that's a very interesting point because this is something that happened to a company and they came to you after the fact to try to fix the issue, which gets expensive, not just to fix it, but also the loss of data, the downtime that they have, the lack of business continuity. So that kind of brings us to the question of what can a company do in the greater Houston area to deploy a managed IT services company to do a health check of their existing IT infrastructure, and what would you do in such a situation where a company said, I'm not sure where I'm at. Can you do a risk assessment and figure out what to do? What is the next step?
Yeah, so when we do those assessments, we come in and we do a couple of different, and it really depends on how their environment is already set up. So one, we run some industry third-party tools that are well known. The first one is made by Kaseya. It's called Rapid Fire Tools. We put that onto the network, and it's non-intrusive. It doesn't, copy any data. What it does is it's looking at how things are set up in the environment. How many servers do you have? How many computers have been on the network? What are your password policies that you might have? So that's the first step. That particular one, that software gives us a really good glance into how the network is just set up and built. Then the next one, we want to look at security. We use a software tool by Galactic Advisors. And that tool is a security tool that we run on just a sampling of the machines, 4 or 5 machines. And that really tells us about the security that's there. So what kind of antivirus do you have or not? Can the software run on the system or not? Is your 365 locked down with your multi-factor authentication or not? And all of those types of things really help us get a great IT security look at the network. And helps us identify those gaps. We also will sit down and just ask them about some of those things. So I might say, hey, Raj, do you have your 2FA turned on for your 365 account? And you're going to tell me, what's that? And when you tell me that, then I'm going to guess that that's a no. And so it's those same kind of things that we're just asking probing questions in addition to these scans so we can really get a good idea. And then last, we'll go visually check, the server room, the equipment room that you have everything in, and look at that and visually see. We see a lot where you've got your battery backup system for the server. It's got a red light on it. We have old servers that are just sitting there that may or may not be used, but they're turned on doing something. and that could be a vulnerability into the network. We see hard drive lights that are blinking that are about to fail. So, a lot of these things are just neglect from the whoever's maintaining the systems prior to us coming in, to say, hey, look, we need to get rid of this antiquated equipment. We need to replace the batteries. We need to change out the drive in the server to make sure that your company stays up and running when there is a potential disaster. If another hard drive fails in that scenario, well, the server is probably going to go down and your business will be down. And we want to do our best to prevent those types of things from happening. So part of that risk assessment is checking to see where you're at, and then coming up and saying, hey, look, this is where you should be or where we would like you to be, and then kind of filling in that gap, whatever that might be. So that could be, hey, my folder security on my network is just wrong, and anybody can get into anything that they want. That means that a hacker could as well. So if a hacker penetrated that network, then it'd be very easy. If a rogue employee just said, hey, I'm disgruntled and I want to delete a bunch of data that's on the server, well, you don't have a backup, or we don't. Maybe he doesn't know that you have a backup or not. Then you're just in a world of hurt at that point and trying to recover all that stuff. So there could be a lot of different approaches that happen. So the risk assessments really help us get that detailed view of that IT network and then give us a plan to go moving forward.
Yeah, so if you're an energy company in Houston or a lawyer or a doctor, and you've got a lot of computers connected to your network, if something goes wrong, that really could be a big issue. So doing a risk assessment, I think, is quite beneficial. And I know that there are situations where even large companies who rely on maybe a parent company or other divisions to do their IT work, sometimes things aren't even set up right, even in large institutions. And I've seen times where, when you come in as a managed IT service provider in Houston and you go take a look at the network and like, a couple of your settings are off and it's letting all kinds of ransomware through. You really got to fix that. So just doing that quick checkup could be very beneficial. Do you do this annually? Is this something that a company needs to do annually, or is it a one-time thing and then your maintenance just takes care of the rest?
That's a great question, and ideally it should be done on a regular basis. So we're seeing a lot where if you're trying to get cyber liability insurance for your company, that the insurance company is requiring a lot of these security tools, policies, and procedures that are implemented into your IT services and network. So at that point, they're going to ask us, well, they're going to ask the client, the company that we're working with, and then they're going to send this document over to us to say, hey, look, are these things that the insurance company requires, are they implemented and implemented in being used? And at that point, we can visually check, just that one time, and of course we can go through it, but it's a good idea to have these risk assessments done on a regular basis. Things change over the year, and technicians will make changes. The client will ask for changes, whatever those might be, and it's very easy to change something on accident, to leave something open, maybe temporarily while you're troubleshooting something, disable a service. Maybe you add a new server and you forget to add the backup to it. So having these periodic checks will really help us make sure that things are going properly. But of course, the client is ultimately responsible for their own network. At the end of the day, it's their data, so they need to be willing to want to do this as well. I mean, we've run into scenarios where we've offered these services like another check, and they're like, no, I don't want to pay for that. And so at that point, you're like, okay, well, we'll hope everything's good, but it's really a great idea to do that regularly.
I like that you said that if somebody wanted to get cyber insurance, because that's something that a lot of people overlook. It used to be that you could just check a box on an insurance form and get the insurance. You can't do that anymore. You really need to have your safeguards in place, and they want to validate it. And a company like yours would be able to, you see enough of these that you know what to look for, whereas a company only sees this one time when they need to get the insurance. So they can actually rely on you for your expertise on having done this multiple times for other companies as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just simple things. Hey, do you have two-factor authentication turned on all of your accounts that you can possibly turn it on? The answer should be yes. And yes, it's not the most fun to do, but it helps safeguard your money, your
Yeah.
data, all kinds of things. Then next is, but 2FA is not by itself, the silver bullet that protects you. So you need to have other monitoring systems in place or application whitelisting. There's all kinds of tools that we can put on the network that will help keep unwanted guests off the network, unwanted software, and then of course, if something does slip through any of that, then we need to make sure that there's backups in place for disasters.
Do you have an example of a company where you went in and did this health checkup, this risk assessment, and found all kinds of things? What was the before and after? What did that look like?
We walked into this one company, I don't know, it was about a year or maybe two ago, and their network was managed by a guy that was on staff there. He had quit the company or got fired. I'm not sure exactly. And and after that, we walked in, and the network was just a disaster. I mean, there was all kinds of problems. Their backups hadn't been working in about 2 years, and that's huge problem right there. So a lot of people think that when I set up any of these tools, that I set it up and I can just forget about it. Oh, the backup is done, so there's nothing else for me to do, right? Well, that's a lovely thought, but at the end of the day, the reality is it's just not the way it goes. If there's a power outage, whatever you're backing up to, maybe it's a hard drive or back in the day tape backup, it could be a cloud service, but what happens if that wherever it's trying to go is off and it can't do it? What if it runs out of space? That's often happened in the past where the backup doesn't. The password changes to the system for whatever reason, so all of a sudden it can't either access what it's trying to access or can't back up to where it's trying to back up to. And so in this particular case, we had to spend, a good 4 hours troubleshooting their backup and getting it up and running. Their phone system hadn't been working. They had one phone number coming in that was kind of working properly, but because the previous person that was managing their IT just didn't understand networking properly, their phone system just didn't work. And so again, we sat down and troubleshot that and got it up and running. So, the health check discovers a lot of these problems, and really it's helping us be preventative. I'm saying more proactive and not reactive in those types of scenarios. So we can walk in and say, hey, look, we've got all these issues that we need to tackle, and these are the things that we're going to go after. In the example where we've run into where there's hard drives that are failing, the same kind of thing. If I know that it's about to fail, then I can recover the data on it much easier than if it has failed. And if I can get it replaced while it's still up and working, then that's better. It's just like your car. I mean, if you're not taking care of your car's not going to get you to wherever you need to go. And then when you need to get there, you're always in a hurry, and the car breaks down. Well, now I've got to take the car to the mechanic, and I've got to go get a rental car or use Uber or whatever. And it's a lot easier to just say, hey, well, let me go get my oil changed. Let me go get my tires rotated. Let me change those tires when they need to be replaced, so that that car is going to be there and ready for you whenever you need it. Now, of course, you might run over a nail on your way to work or something, so not everything can be prevented, but normal wear and tear maintenance can absolutely be handled. And it's the same with the network. If I'm making sure that there's security software and backups in place, that I'm doing preventive maintenance, making sure the patches are installed, and just handling day-to-day problems, the network will run pretty smoothly for the most part. But if you're neglecting it and not paying attention to it, well, it's going to fall apart. And then when you need to make payroll that Friday, and now the server's down, and now I can't get payroll out very easily, and now I'm stressed out and freaking out and having issues. So doing that maintenance is critical. Sure.
I think one of the biggest things we can take away from this is a managed IT service provider in Houston is going to help you sleep better at night. So
Absolutely.
that's one of the biggest things. Well, what should a company look for when they're trying to select a managed IT service provider in the greater Houston area?
The biggest thing that we hear complaints about is response time from their service provider. So, they'll very commonly complain that they'll put in a ticket or they'll call in for support, and then they don't hear anything for a day or two. And depending on the issue, a day or two may be okay, but if I'm having an emergency where I can't do something, then that's a problem. It's also a problem if the employee is just stuck. Let's say that my Outlook just fails to work and I can't send emails out. Well, I can't communicate with people anymore via Outlook. And so that becomes a problem for that particular employee. Well, he can't work or she can't work. So then at that point, I'm stuck and I'm just waiting around for an IT guy to call me back. And I'm waiting for 2 or 3 days until they get, a response to me where finally they, fix it. That's the number one complaint that we hear is response time. So I would definitely check to see call records, check with, references to make sure that they can do it. The next thing is going to be their expertise level and making sure that it covers whatever the business needs. So if you've got a specialized ERP system that has issues that you need for your manufacturing business, well, you don't want to make sure that either A, the service provider that you're selecting has experience working with that, or can work with the support for the ERP system to get whatever they need completed. So that's going to be upgrades, maintenance, repairing of the software, troubleshooting issues, of course. But it's going to be any of those types of things that you're going to really look out for. And then how long they've been in business. I think that's a big thing. Did they just start up yesterday? Did the guy just quit his job or get fired and he just started an MSP? That may not be very reliable. And of course, in the beginning, it's very tough starting a business, of course. But if that person's again not available because they're looking for full-time work or whatever, then that could also be a problem. We also see sometimes people are using their brother that's into computers and he can kind of do it part-time. And that might work in the beginning. It certainly doesn't work for businesses that are relying on their technology day in and day out. And if there's a major emergency and you're calling your brother's uncle that does computers or whatever, he's at his full-time job and he can't get to you until later this evening. So really making sure that their availability, reliability, the response, and their expertise is all exactly what you need and what you're looking for.
So you mentioned that response time is one of the biggest reasons people come to Braintek. What if a business already has a service provider? They're not happy with them, but they're already managing their patches and other things. What's the transition look like? What should the company know about how to transition from another IT service provider to yours?
Well, the biggest thing that we run across is having documentation and passwords for the network. So if we're trying to onboard a new client and they do not have that information, it makes it a lot tougher for us to onboard. So the first thing, of course, is going to be passwords. And if you don't have the passwords, then what we have to do is we have to break in, just like a locksmith would, into your car when you lost your keys. So we have to do that. And it's not going to be just for one computer. It's for every computer, the server, if you have those, your networking equipment, your access points, etc. So we have to break all of that stuff. So having those passwords is critical. Every once in a while, we run into scenarios where the IT provider gets very disgruntled when they're leaving, and so they'll hold that stuff hostage or just refuse to give it up or whatever. And so in those particular cases, we really need to work with the client to massage that and try to get that data from that other person, whatever it takes. If it doesn't, then we'll work around it, but that'll help make it a much smoother process. Having some kind of an overlap between the previous IT and the new IT is also very helpful. So they may say, hey, here's all your documentation, but as we're going through and we're checking systems or onboarding things, maybe we run across something that isn't part of that documentation. And so then at that point, we still have some overlap in services that we can go off and ask the previous IT, hey, what was this, or how was this set up? And then they can tell us, while they're being paid and whatnot to help out. So I think those two things are going to be real critical. Of course, communication, making sure that we talk to the client and they understand what's actually happening is very critical. Saying, hey, if let's say, for example, we don't have the password to the firewall, so we're going to say, hey, we're going to have to take down your firewall for a half an hour while we reconfigure it. That's going to take the internet down. When is a good time for us to do that? Can we do that at lunch, in the beginning of the day, after the day ends? Maybe it's on the weekend. So whatever, we have to communicate those kind of things to the client so they just understand what's going on. And if they don't understand, of course, then they get angry or just frustrated because they just don't have a clue what's really happening. So I think that communication is really key as well. Sitting down and talking to them about what their expectations are ahead of time, talking about any potential problems that we may encounter doing anything. So, hey, your server's on its last leg. We need to replace this drive before we can really move on to the next stage. And getting that repaired is probably maybe the first step before we finish onboarding. And so identifying those potential issues up front is also very critical.
Sometimes a company might come to you and say, we'd like to start small and then start looking at the other services that you offer. Is that something you do, or do you provide it mostly as a comprehensive package?
So we like to have an all-inclusive package that we have, encompassing everything. So we start off saying, hey, your monthly support's going to be this amount, depending on the size of the business and the tools that we're going to be putting onto the environment. And then from there, it's going to be other kinds of issues that we run up against. So hey, we need to replace the server, so we got to go get quotes for that equipment, and then quotes on the time that's going to take to replace that, and then whatever else is potentially involved. So there may be some additional software that has to be upgraded, for example. Um, so all of those types of things are going to be part of our packages. And
Mhm.
yeah, we can start off smaller where maybe the remote only package. Of course, we can have the everything's included package. So it just kind of depends, and we have several different options to choose from.
That's very good. And it all helps create a very stress-free IT journey for your clients in the Houston area. Um, Greg, I really appreciate all this insight because it's very useful for companies to know how to make sure that they sleep better at night with their IT and not have to worry about the risk of losing their data, which can put them out of business, getting attacked, and all kinds of other nasty things that could happen if you don't have all your ducks in a row. How can people reach you? How can they contact BrainTech? What's the process to get started?
Well, they could visit our website at braintek.com. They can click on request a quote. They can give us a call at 281 367 8253. And of course, they can just shoot me an email if they'd like at greg@braintek.com, and I can get them in touch with one of our sales reps, and they can start off with a free assessment and see what's going on in their network that we can help them out with.
Very good. Greg, thank you for an insightful conversation.
Thank you, Roger.